Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino and Em here again with another episode of Deep Listens. And today we've got a very special bonus episode or off-week episode. Today we're discussing Nuzlocke and Pokemon. Because Pete apparently has been keeping from us that he is a deeply serious Pokemon player for years. He's been acting like
I think I was a nerd.
He's been acting like he's cool because he does Muay Thai, but no, he's a nerd like the rest of us. What a loser. That voice you hear is Pete Busby. Loser.
I'm finally prepared to bear my shame with all the members of the podcast. I've never said anything on this podcast that's embarrassed me until this moment right now.
7 years in, finally.
Yep, finally.
Gotcha.
But before we get to that, maybe my best fun fact ever in 7 years, too, as far as I'm concerned. So this is about cats.
The musical?
No. That would have been a cool fun fact, though, as well. This is about their whiskers, also known as vibraci.
Oh.
So this is a quick fun fact, but I swear to you, this blew my mind when I heard this, right? So obviously, cats have whiskers, on their cheeks, on their chins. They also have whiskers above their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
They also have whiskers on the underside of their wrists.
What?
Weird.
Yeah, they're known as carpal whiskers. Apparently, they're super useful in hunting. It helps them tell if there's any movement near their paws, I guess.
Huh.
Yeah, so cats, whiskers on their wrists. Wild.
Interesting.
That's a weird place to have whiskers.
I know. Imagine if you had a wrist mustache.
Oh, I don't have to imagine that.
I don't even have a regular mustache.
You could.
I could, but it would look shitty. Pete can't, and it's funny.
I can't.
Really?
I can't grow facial hair.
Oh.
Yeah,
It gets
his
it's patchy and long. It's gross.
Yeah, it's not a good look.
Nope.
That other voice you heard is Em Palladino, the mistress of games. How are you, Em?
I'm doing good. I feel like it was just yesterday that we were here recording a podcast. It was not yesterday. It was 2 days ago.
But when you're hearing this, it will be many more than 2 days
Yes.
since the last show went up, so it'll be fine.
Happy to be here talking about Pokemon, which was unexpected.
I know.
Have we ever had a Pokemon game in this show?
Yeah, we did a special Pokemon
right.
Sword and Shield podcast, you and I.
Yes, we did do that. But we haven't had an old school one. So
No, we've never picked one for the main show.
let's think about that.
Yeah, I know. I've got Pokemon Red in a Game Boy somewhere, just ready. Ready and waiting.
As far as I'm concerned, any Pokemon game before the physical special split is dead to me. I don't even consider it to exist.
You're right. See, Pete is a man of culture.
Mhm.
We're learning a lot about his preferences here, and he's correct.
Well, we will get into that and more once we start talking about Pokemon. But before we do, our normal housekeeping, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast at gmail.com. That's our email address. You could get in touch with the show. You can support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens, which would get you access to our Discord. It lets you pick a game for the Off the Deep End people to play. It lets us get one person closer to having to play Sonic 06, which when we get to 30 patrons, we will play Sonic 06. Oh, God. So you could do that to us. Also, if you could send in emails, we are rapidly approaching our 200th proper episode. And I would love to do a write-in show if we could, get some questions from folks. We did that on one of our other anniversary shows a long time ago, but I feel like now we've been going long enough. It's about time to do one of those again. So go ahead, get an email in, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com, and, just send us your feedback. Send us any thoughts you have, any questions. For our longtime listeners, we'd love to hear from you and shout you out. So
If you
it's
are,
rapidly approaching.
Yes, if you are one of our listeners from South Africa or Venezuela, where we are apparently very popular, you should, if any episode is one you were going to write in for, it should be the 200th episode, I think.
Yes, please
tell
please
us.
explain.
Please tell us. We're so curious.
And to our Venezuelan listeners, por qué?
I don't even know how to say video games good in Spanish.
Video juegos
Yeah.
is video games. I don't know anything else. I'm just gonna say por qué. I know that's valid grammar. It's just why. So do get right in. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to do a write-in show. So, and our other always bookkeeping reminder, if you're in a position to do so, please do donate to the National Network of Abortion Funds. Reproductive health care in the U.S. still in a bad shape. Still not doing great. So if you can make someone's life in a difficult situation a little bit easier, please do so. Make that donation. All right. Without further ado, Peter, you're a freak. You're the game freak. It's you.
It's me.
Why?
Yeah, I'm the only one here who's a true gamer, obviously. Yes. So I think the place to start is just outline of the rules, right?
Yes. What is a Nuzlocke?
What is a Nuzlocke? So there are 2 canonical rules for a Nuzlocke, and then there's a million variations from there. So we'll definitely talk about the variations. But the 2 rules you have to abide by for a Nuzlocke are: 1, you can only catch the first Pokemon you encounter on a route, and 2, if a Pokemon faints, it's dead. And you can store it in your box, that's what I do, or you can release it entirely if you don't like cluttering up your box. Those are the 2 big rules for a Nuzlocke. I guess honestly where I might have started was, why do they call it a Nuzlocke? Does anyone
That's
know?
another good question.
I know, pick me.
What was that, Em?
I know, pick
Cut
me.
out.
Damn it. Fuck, I know this one. Well, I can say it. I can say it on my end, and you guys are the ones who don't hear me.
That's true. I can hear you now.
All right. Well, the reason it's called a Nuzlocke is because the first instance of someone using this rule set, they were putting out comics about their adventure, and they were also a fan of Lost, and so they were doing a run of Pokemon Ruby where they got a Nuzleaf.
Trashmon.
Yes. Not very good, but they named it after John Locke from Lost. And also they made him have Locke's face at some points. And that was the naming convention from then on.
I see. Well, that's a very cool rule set.
Yeah, those are the canonical rules. My personal favorite variation is the hardcore Nuzlocke.
Oh, man.
How does one make it harder core?
So there are 2 big additions for the hardcore Nuzlocke. One is no healing items in battle. Mm-hmm. So you can't use potions, full restores, full heals, any of that while you're battling. Can still use held items, though. There's no over leveling. So whatever level the gym leader is, that's as far as you could level up your Pokemon. So if the gym leader is level 50, your Pokemon are level 50. They can't go any higher. And then there's usually a dupes clause. Mm-hmm. So if I catch a Pidgey on Route 1, I can't also catch a Pidgey on Route 15. Mm-hmm. Them's the rules.
Mm-hmm. So in a regular Nuzlocke, you could?
It depends. Usually people play with dupes clauses because there's some high-level strategy you can use it for, which we can get to, but that's mostly preference. Usually the rule is we don't want people to get a whole bunch of Gyarados at the beginning.
Okay. Yeah.
Because Gyarados are kick-ass.
Pretty good.
They're kick-ass and there are Magikarps everywhere.
That's why Lance has 2 of them.
That's true. Mm-hmm. So, Pete, what was the first Pokemon game you Nuzlocked?
So as I said, when we sort of first started out. Anything before the physical special split is dead to me.
And for those who don't
I'm sorry,
recognize the
yes.
physical special split, the soul and body, and its duality.
Yeah, we're no longer a Cartesian dualist podcast here. So in Pokemon Red, I think up through is it until Diamond and Pearl? Do you know offhand?
I think it was Ruby and Sapphire that were the first ones.
Okay.
That's
So
why
for
they're the first good ones.
So at least for the first 2 gens then, attacks were either special or physical attack just based on type. So I don't remember them anymore, but let's say like all fighting attacks were always physical and all psychic attacks were always special. Starting in either M says Gen 3, I'm inclined to believe her. Starting in Gen 3, they started to split them up based on moves. So maybe a fighting move like Aura Sphere would be special, whereas one like Double Kick would be physical. So you could start to give Pokemon moves based on what aligned with their best stats.
Okay, and for those who don't know, physical and special, it's a physical attack, special attack. They each key off of different stats for the Pokemon in terms of damage, right?
Yeah.
It's special attack and attack.
Yep, and they relate to different physical attack. The damage you deal is countered by physical defense, special attack by special defense. Actually, in Gen 1, there was just special.
Mm-hmm.
So you had one special stat that was both your attack and your defense. So like Slowbro, still pretty good, but Gen 1 was basically broken because you could throw out an Amnesia and suddenly you have great attack and great defense.
Yep. And this is also why in Gen 1 psychic types were so good, is because all of the things that they were strong against were like, or weak against actually. The things they were weak against were like bug types and
Ghosts.
So they weren't weak against Ghost in Gen 1.
Oh.
They were supposed to be.
Oh, right.
But there was some sort of screw up in the code or something, so they weren't. They were super effective against Ghost.
Yes. So even worse. And also in Gen 1 there were like no bug type moves, so it was basically like they were invincible to everything, and that's why Mewtwo is the best Pokemon in Gen 1.
Makes a ton of sense. So Pete, which gen? So you said red and blue, garbage to you, dead to you. Mm-hmm. Gold, silver, also dead to you. So Ruby, is that the first? Ruby, Sapphire, that's the first one you've Nuzlocked?
No, so honestly, I'm more of a recent joiner to the Nuzlocke than that. So starting with Diamond and Pearl, that's when I started to get basically involved in like the minutia of the whole thing, right? Learning about effort values, inherited values, which are basically ways to like maximize your Pokemon's attacks or just all stats. Mm-hmm. And then starting with X and Y, that was my first Nuzlocke.
Hell yeah.
Which was a good choice because it's considered by many to be one of the easier games to Nuzlocke.
Correct.
Okay, so in a Nuzlocke, you said the first time you see a Pokemon, you have to catch it there or you don't get to catch it. Is that correct?
Yes, if it faints or if it's Abra and it teleports away, whatever, you don't get an encounter for that route.
Yes.
You just don't get a Pokemon.
It is based on the route number. So if you're in the first part of the game where you don't have any Pokeballs, sometimes people count this as like you have had that encounter already. It depends on how hardcore you are. But you will not get a chance to catch a Pokemon on route like 1 if you go with that method.
Which would be rough because there aren't that many routes.
Yes.
Beginning of the game.
There are a limited number of routes in the entire game, and sometimes in like Pete, how do you play it where there are like Pokemon on the map? Like Snorlax is a good example, where that is like, can you catch that Pokemon? Can you catch the legendaries?
Again, yeah, all these are, like I said, there are a million variations. So I don't play with legendaries. Oh. Something like Snorlax or like a Kecleon, that's just around. I count that. I can catch it, but it is my encounter for the route. Mm-hmm. One sort of thing I do allow myself is gift Pokemon. So, like, if somebody's just like, hey, you want this Lapras? I'll be like, sure, I'll take the Lapras. I don't count that because I feel like people are being generous and giving me gifts. Some people try to cheese breeding too, where they're like, okay, if I get an egg, it's wherever I hatch the egg, that's the encounter. So you can hatch the egg in a city where there's no other Pokemon, and then that would be your encounter for the city. I think that's a little cheap, so I don't do that.
Do you breed Pokemon in your Nuzlocke? No?
No.
Okay, so breeding is off limits. So how do you manage this, right? So like in some of the early, in some of these locations, there might be 3, 4, 5 Pokemon that you can encounter on any given route, sometimes more.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just get a Pidgey or something, you get some bad Pokemon. I guess Pidgey's probably too good.
Yeah, Pidgey's okay.
What would be if you get a Grimer,
Dunsparce,
Dunsparce, what is the stupid Zigzagoon? If you get a Zigzagoon or something, is that really bad? Are you just like devastated in your run because now you're stuck with a Zigzagoon that if it ever dies, you're screwed? Or how do you mitigate that?
So it depends. Let me elaborate.
Okay.
So sometimes trash Pokemon are good because it's sometimes useful just to kill them off. So like if you need to set up a switch, so let's say I'm fighting a Charizard and I have my Venusaur out, right? That's not a good matchup for me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I just switch straight into my Blastoise, I give up a turn that I might not want to give up. So I might put that Zigzagoon in the middle, let him die, and then I can bring in my Blastoise.
Mm-hmm.
So
These are sort of heartless considerations you have to make.
Yeah.
To save yourself a turn, you're like, hey, Zigzagoon, you got to take one for the team, buddy.
Yeah.
If he
They're
lives,
just buffers to you.
Yeah. If he lives, great. You get to do that maneuver again.
Also, there's one more rule often in play in Nuzlocke that I failed to mention, and that's nicknaming.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Nuzlockers will nickname their Pokemon to try to establish some sort of emotional connection.
Do you
Obviously, that doesn't really. I do nickname them just because it's something to do, but obviously it doesn't make me that emotional about them.
All Zigzagoons are nicknamed Meat.
In the last Nuzlocke run that I did, it was Pokemon X actually. There was a point where you can trade for you trade a love disc, and you can trade that to get a Steelix.
Good trade.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to come back and do that. So I found a love disc by chance in a city. And so I was like, hell yeah. And I named it Trade Fodder. And then I just went and I traded it off to the guy.
I name them Gone whenever I do something like that. But that Steelix is a good trade. That sets up a really nice bit in like the beginning if you can get it. But Gino, the other thing that's important for Nuzlocke is catching order. So like Zubat's a really good example. There are millions of Zubats in the game, right? So you might pick a cave that only has Zubats or just has trash. You catch your Zubat there, and then if you play no dupes, you don't have to worry about running into Zubat anymore.
So what happens if you run into a Zubat first in a cave? That just doesn't count?
Yeah. You would just run and then re-roll the encounter. So like I'm doing Ultra Sun right now. That's the one I'm working on. So there's a cave that just has 3 Pokemon. It has Diglett, Zubat, and Larvitar. So there's a cave that has a 70% Zubat shot early on. I catch my Zubat there. There's an automatic Diglett encounter on another route. So I get that route. I make sure I get that Diglett. And then at that point, the only thing I can catch in this cave is Larvitar, which is awesome late game because it turns into Tyranitar, who's a total monster. So by setting up my encounters in the right order, I can ensure that I get a Larvitar.
Okay. So you make sure that you rig the important routes where you can, and then the luck has a chance to happen other places.
Pretty much.
Very cool. So what is the rule for starter Pokemon? You still get to pick whatever you want?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. You get whichever one you want, and if it dies, it's gone.
Okay. Em, you also have done Nuzlocks, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Which games have you Nuzlocked?
Successfully, not very many. The most successful one that I had was my recent excursion through Pokemon X. And other than that, I've done, I believe it was Emerald, which failed around the desert area in that. Let's see. I did Platinum. I like to do the third games in the series because that usually has the most stuff.
Yeah, they're always better.
Yeah. Did a Platinum. I can't even remember where that one wound up. Got about halfway in. I've done a bunch of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So both of y'all have a lot of experience with this. Do you gauge your starter Pokemon based on what you know the game? Like, are you picking starter Pokemon based on the game, or are you picking starter Pokemon based on what you think the random encounters you're going to run into early? Is it like, well, I know the first gym is this, so I want this, or I know the Elite Four. This starter is good, so I'm going to pick that here at the very beginning, all geared up for eventually the Elite Four because I expect my starter to make it that long. Or is it, go with your gut? How do you – because that's one of the first decisions you get to make in a Pokemon game.
True.
Yeah, Em, do you want to start us off? You have opinions on this?
Yeah, like my Nuzlocke runs usually end like pretty quickly. So I usually pick whichever one is like catching my interest early on. In my X run, I chose the grass starter, which was Chespin, which I don't think is incredible throughout that game, but it's a very tanky option. And then there's a like halfway point where you can get a starter from Gen 1. And so in order to counter the fire type that I was up against with my rival, I chose the Squirtle. So I had a Blastoise by the end of it. So there's a little bit of choosing, but right out of the gate, I'm usually just like, let me see if I can get to the first gym before I, invest any thought into it.
I say.
Yeah, they can end early and often. Like this is, I want to say my fifth, in this most recent iteration, my fifth run through on Ultra Sun.
Oh, wow.
And I've yet to make it the whole way. So I got to the Elite Four last time, but couldn't quite make it through.
Then
so
everyone died.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's not necessarily worth like picking your starter based on that late game. Like you should have at least a decent amount of Pokemon to pick from by that point. Like I already lost my starter in this one, and it didn't really matter that much. So you can pick it based on early gyms if you want, but I generally default to the fire starter for two reasons. One is because there aren't usually a ton of fire Pokemon. Honestly, it's one of the rare types, but there's usually a million water Pokemon, and there are a lot of routes where your only choice is water Pokemon. Like if you have surfing routes, things like that. So you'll end up with a lot of water usually, and usually less fire. The only exception to that is Ruby and Sapphire. Mudkip is by far the best starter in that one because you get a water ground typing, which is just a killer typing. Mm-hmm. And if you get up to a Marshtomp by then, Marshtomp can just win it for you.
Okay. So basically, in the exceptional cases where there is a clear dominant starter, you go with that one. But otherwise, fire, because there tend to just be fewer fire environments in a Pokemon game as compared to surfing levels or areas with a ton of fishing. And so you can get a replacement level water type or a replacement level grass type whenever you want. But replacement level fire can be tough because the places that have fire sometimes have rock and ground and things like that.
Yeah,
mucking
usually,
it up.
I mean, it's that early on, you're probably okay regardless. But if you want to optimize, I usually go fire.
Fire flames. That makes sense. So, in your runs, what is the best luck you've had, and what's the baddest beat?
So on my last Elite Four run, I had a dark Pokemon my starter Incineroar up against Ghost. So I just had to hit one move. I was like, if I hit one, it's fine. But I was confused, and I got popped on 3 straight confusions, which is, I think, 50% each. So that's, what, a 12.5% chance?
Yep.
And then I had no Pokemon that were faster than the remaining Ghost Frostlass. So Frostlass just tore me up. I was pretty upset about that one. I was honestly very angry. But this run, I had a Jolteon that didn't have Focus Sash or anything. That's a item that'll let you keep 1 HP. And just the math worked out that I survived on 1 HP. I forget who I was fighting at that point. But that saved my Jolteon and then saved that battle. So the luck evens out, I guess, eventually.
With enough time. Em, what about you? Worst, greatest luck, baddest beat?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because I use a tracker which like keeps you fairly like well versed in where you can get Pokemon or not.
Did you?
Yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you find one you liked?
like a tracker to use?
Yeah. I like download a few every once in a while, and I always hate them.
Yeah, I use Nuzlocke.app, which
It's a good name.
seemed to work. I was trying to see if I had my save still in there for my X run, because I know that there was a few like Pokemon on routes that were really clutch. Like I got a Golurk, which is a ghost
That's a good one.
ghost ground, and that was very helpful, especially after it evolved, because it just became like a physical tank. Or that's that was pretty good for the back half of my run, and then
Ghost.
it died.
Ghost 2 is always a good typing
Yes.
because you want typings with immunities for switches.
Mm-hmm.
So Ghost is immune to fighting and normal. Ground's immune to electric. Fairy in the newer games is immune to dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it a lot easier to switch Pokemon in and out if you have those sorts of immunities.
Yes. Always good to have, like, especially like in those earlier generations. There's stuff like Sableye, which is Ghost Dark, and so those cover its own weaknesses. So it actually has no weaknesses. So you can switch it into pretty much anything and not have to worry about like that sort of
Getting one shot.
yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think if I had any super bad luck. Like there's always the story of, you get paralyzed and then you need to hit just one more time, and then you get stunned and can't do anything. So I don't know if I had prepared a specific run for this show, I might have had more stories to tell. But
Well, if nothing just springs to mind as like that was garbage or that was incredible, then that honestly good for you.
yeah,
Being able to compartmentalize and move on. I feel like anytime bad luck happens to me in a game, I remember that for the rest of my fucking life.
yeah. I mean, being a Nuzlocke player is just like, you gotta understand that you're gonna lose basically everything along the way. Oh, you know why I don't have a save on here? It's because I switched from Chrome to Firefox, and I didn't port that over in my cookies. I understand now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I try to do when I'm Nuzlocking is avoid the game counter. Where it's
Oh.
like you've been paying for 20 hours or however long
Oh.
it might be.
Yeah.
Because then when you die, all those hours of your life are gone.
Yep. There's
forever.
pretty much no reason to do anything.
Nope. You don't even have to battle all the trainers, honestly,
Yeah.
unless you want the experience. It's just more chance for your Pokemon to die.
I usually do. Like, I have a personal set of rules, I guess. You gotta fight every Pokemon you come across. You can't run from fights. If there are trainers, I have to fight them. which probably is stupid. I shouldn't do it. But also I don't have like the leveling clause where I can be as over leveled as I want. And starting at X, there's the experience share that affects the entire party. Do you usually set that to off, or do you leave it on?
No, what I usually do is I leave it on and then I rotate my Pokemon through. So
Yeah.
like once one hits the level cap, I'll box it, I'll bring out the other one. There have
I
been a few
see.
times though where I've had to shut it off. But that's also why like I avoid battles sometimes. Because if I'm on my third string party,
Right.
I'm just like I don't want to battle these people and get waxed like
Yeah.
playing my trash mons.
I will say I did have a situation where I was like, oh, let me switch into a bunch of Pokemon I don't normally use to get them levels, and then I ended up having the usual thing that happens. I do remember something terrible. If you run into a double battle, those fucking suck ass.
Oh my God, they're horrible.
Every time there is like two children standing next to each other, those are the ones that fuck me up the worst. Like I had a run end because I was playing a modded version of, I believe it was, I don't know, I don't remember. It was a modded version of something that made it all more difficult. And I was doing just fine, and then I ran into those two little kids on just a random route. I was like, well, I have to fight them. Here I go. And then they wiped me out. And the rule is, even if you have Pokemon in your box, if you have your party wiped, that's just a game over. So yeah, we should specify that.
Yeah, we forgot that one too.
Yes.
There are lots of rules.
Yeah. Generally accepted. Not every version is going to use that.
Damn.
Yeah. So
All battles to the death.
yes. Yeah.
If
Exactly.
you wake up at the Poke Center, you didn't wake up that day.
Correct. See, you got it. Yeah, it's tough.
Cause of death Pokemon.
Cause of death. Pokemon. Pokemon too
Yeah,
hard.
Em was talking about the mods too. I don't
Yeah.
play too many of them just because I don't feel like downloading them. But that's where like the real hardcore action is.
Mm-hmm.
So like the most famous one is probably Emerald Kaizo.
Ew.
That's like widely considered the hardest. What would you call it? Fan mod, I guess. But there's ones for all of them. There are versions of Red, Gold, Sapphire, all of them. And like there's like people basically what they do is they make the Pokemon stronger. They make the teams better, so the AI actually like uses strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I know it's horrible. But one thing they do, which is nice, is they generally add more variety to the routes. So like in the early game, especially, Nuzlocke can get a little repetitive because you're like, oh, it's another Wurmple or another Rattata. How exciting!
Mm-hmm. I found the version that I was trying to remember. It is a mod of White 2 or Black 2. I don't know which one it was. It is called. Let me see if it'll tell me. God damn it! Of course, it doesn't have it, but there is a harder version of Black and White, which makes it really difficult. And I was trying to do that, and I wouldn't even like to play that game without doing a Nuzlocke in that version because it was so fucking hard.
Have you ever gotten any of the like early trash Pokemon to the end of the game just by sheer leveling, or have you ever had a Rattata or a Raticate where it's like, well, this Raticate's just a monster and now I use it?
Sometimes.
So yeah, the one good example actually is Zubat. Keep going back to the Zubat well. So Zubat's actually pretty legit in the later games because it gets to Golbat at 20 and then 22? 22. And then Crobat is a friendship evolution, which if you're playing optimally, again, the best way to do is just to run because it's based on the number of steps you take.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just run around a lot, which is annoying, but it's one way to do it, you can get a Crobat by 23. And Crobat's actually pretty damn strong. So you can start with the Zubat and take Crobat all the way to the end game.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
How do you deal with trade evolutions?
I don't. I mean, I don't have anyone to trade to usually when I'm doing these.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have a way of dealing with them?
So not in the early games.
Okay.
The nice thing about like Ultra Sun, and I want to say X and Y too, but maybe I'm wrong, is that there's a like internet trading,
Mm-hmm.
and I think people have just like hacked Pokemon into it because if you ask for like a level 100 Groudon for your Rattata, somebody will send it eventually.
Yeah.
But like I can list a Haunter there and just be like, I just want a Haunter of the same level. And when I get it, it becomes a Gengar. So that's how I usually deal with that.
Ah, I see.
E-trading.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Out here day trading Pokemon.
Correct. I just suffer with a Haunter if I get into that situation. Which I actually did have a Haunter that I couldn't evolve in my last run. Also, I looked it up. It's called the mod that I was trying to come up with, Blaze Black 2 or Volt White 2.
Like I think I did know Blaze Black actually.
Yeah, they're tough. They're not for the faint of heart. And I was trying to Nuzlocke them, and I was like, I'm not even gonna try.
So, what would you, if you had some generic advice for someone who wanted to go into a Nuzlocke? Are there any generic bits beyond, prepare to lose your Pokemon, don't get too emotionally attached if you can avoid it, but like, hey, it turns out that early game bird Pokemon that's in every single game, it tends to be pretty good. You should try to, if you get one of those early bug Pokemon they always stick you with, they're always trash. Are there any, generic bits of advice you would give?
The early bug Pokemon are actually pretty good, especially if you're playing with level caps. Because if you can get like a Butterfree at level 10 and like gets confusion or something, it can do some damage actually. So don't sleep on them early. You're gonna want to like replace them pretty quick. I'm trying to think of just like generic advice. So like one thing you're gonna want to learn about is EV training, especially in the later games where it gets easier. So like EV training stands for effort values. So basically the Pokemon you kill can change your stats. So like if I wipe a bunch of Zubats, my speed will go up. And like early on, it used to be one point. So like the maximum number of effort values you can get in a given stat are 252. Man, I'm getting deep into the weeds here.
That's fine. That's what this is for.
But so you can get a maximum number of 252 in any one stat, and you can get 510 total. So in the very early days when Nintendo still hated all of its fans, you had to kill 252 Zubat to max your speed stat. Which
that's a lot.
That's like a day of work. In the later games, you can equip items to increase your stats more quickly. And they have things like horde battles or SOS battles. So I can just chain a whole bunch of Zubats together. So it went from taking like hours to now you can finish EV training a stat in like 15 minutes if you do it right.
It's also
I was just going to say it's a huge change, and I'm glad Nintendo stopped hating everyone.
Yes. What I was going to say to that effect is these values are secret in most games.
Yeah.
Up until I think X and Y is when they actually like made a way to see that. So you just had to there were calculators that you could plug this information into. That would be like, well, this is a Rattata. It's level, 30. It's going to have an attack stat of this, and then based on your nature, there's a certain range it'll be in, and then this will be what your value is. And they made it so there is a like one of those, I don't even know what to call this chart, where it's like
there's a term for it. It's like a pie chart, but it grows.
Yeah, like it grows out from the center, and then it's like all your little stats.
Star chart looking things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
yeah,
you get it.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They made it so you could see the actual growth of each stat, And I think there was I think they took it away in later versions actually. But in X and Y it was readily available because they had a whole mini game you could do in order to boost your stats, which it still took a while, but it was faster than like I have to kill 50 fucking Ponyta or whatever.
But like as annoying as it is, too, it's hugely important because
Yeah.
for each 4 effort values, you get 1 stat boost.
Yep.
So if you get all 252 stat points, that's what, a 60 something plus speed at level 100.
Yep.
You're not going to get to level 100, but that's still 30 plus speed at level 50, which is a lot. The other thing there is, just while we're talking about annoying stuff that's in the game, there are effort values, which you can see. There are also inherited values,
Yeah.
IVs, which you can't see at all until the very end of the game. You can't see them at all until, I think, Ultra Sun, and then you can check them at least. Before Sword and Shield, there was no way to change them, no way to affect them at all. It was just, luck of the draw. And that's another 30 points at level 100. So if you had bad inherited values, you were just stuck with those for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
You caught a Spearow that was from bad parentage, and now the Spearow is
much.
just
Literally
bad.
Yep.
It's just a bad Spearow. Yeah.
Like I did like breeding of Pokemon in X and Sword and Shield, and that makes it far easier than any game before that to see these values, and it's a big pain in the ass because you want a Pokemon to inherit 31 IVs in every stat that is important to it, which is basically everything. If it's a physical attacker, you don't need special attack, but a lot of people want 6 perfect IVs on their Pokemon, so it takes a lot of time and a lot of breed a Pokemon with really good attack, breed a Pokemon with really good defense, breed them together, hope it gets both of them.
Hatch the egg and find out if it did.
Yeah.
Pretty much. This is where
Yeah.
the online trading comes in handy again too, because people will take Dittos with perfect IVs and toss them online, and then if you breed that Ditto holding a Destiny Knot, for one reason or another, it'll inherit potentially up to 5 categories from that Ditto.
Yes.
So again, still a lot of hatching, but like exponentially less.
Yeah. And
you pay this Ditto forward.
Exactly.
This Ditto is from good stock. Look at this genealogy on this Ditto.
It's basically Pokemon eugenics.
Yeah.
It sired a perfect Torchic.
Yeah. The real pain in the ass with this, also in earlier generations than Sword and Shield, is you had to take the Pokemon out of your box. You had to bring it to one city at the Pokemon Center and then show it to a man. And he took lots of dialogue boxes just to tell you if it was good or not.
Yeah. You can do it in Ultra Sun too, but again, for whatever dumb reason, they don't let you do it until after the game and after you've hatched something like 25 eggs.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, now you can check your stats.
Yep.
Excuse me, this Psyduck don't look right. 1 IVs and everything.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Imagine doing that hundreds of times. And also the daycare is in a different area entirely.
Yep. And then you got to worry about your natures. And then Pokemon did this other really annoying thing. I think this started with, it might be X and Y, or at the very latest Sun and Moon, where they took Pokemon and they gave some of them way better abilities.
Yeah.
It's like all the abilities you'd want, but they call them hidden abilities. So the only way you can get these in Ultra Sun or Ultra Moon is you have to do one of these SOS battles and like mill down 10, 15 Pokemon in a row. And then when you get to the 16th, it might have this hidden ability.
Maybe. And there's no way to tell.
Nope.
There's one way to tell is if you trace it, and then
Yeah.
you can see.
So like,
And
Nintendo is basically like, look, we're going to give you all these tools to make a kick-ass Pokemon, but we're going to ensure it takes 10 to 15 hours in the early games
yeah,
to actually do it
the real
For one.
yes,
for one.
exactly for one Pokemon. In earlier generations, in Black and White, I believe, there was a whole online like dream world they called it, where you had
Oh
to,
no.
in order to get Pokemon with the hidden abilities, you had to transfer a Pokemon into the dream world. You had to do a bunch of mini games on your computer, and then you had to transfer the Pokemon back, and there was a chance that anything you found in the dream world would be able to give the hidden ability to a Pokemon. So imagine having to do that. Imagine having to do that for an entire team of Pokemon.
Brutal.
It's
Look,
it,
So, have you done this process for a Nuzlocke?
God no.
no,
to-
you couldn't
to-
do. It would be against the
Okay.
rules.
Well,
Yeah.
you couldn't do the breeding, but the I'm gonna EV train this
Oh yeah,
Yep.
Chikorita
Definitely.
until it's fast.
all my
Basically
moms.
have to.
Okay, basically everyone is getting EV trained.
Yeah.
But like I said, so I don't usually Nuzlocke the early games because this is so miserable.
Yep.
I Nuzlocke the nader ones where, like I said, I can get it done in, half hour,
Mhm.
which I mean that's still an annoying amount of time, but much less annoying.
Okay, so your only chance is because you are getting random Pokemon and having to deal with it, you have to make them the very best that they can possibly be.
Yep.
Pretty much. That's one reason why like the fan mods, like Emerald Kaiser or Blaze Black, will usually take out EVs
Mm-hmm.
because they're just so annoying to deal with.
So, do you where do TMs and HMs come into all of this?
Oh boy.
Are they allowed?
So
They are.
yeah.
Well, do you have a special rule for this?
No, I was just gonna say again, Nintendo stopped hating us
Yes.
so much.
Yes. Correct.
Early on, definitely in Ruby and Sapphire, I think Diamond and Pearl too.
Yep.
TMs were single use.
Up until
So
I think Black and White or
Yeah.
X and Y, TMs were single use, and there were some that you could only get one of in the entire game.
Mhm.
And so finally they were like, you know what? Just use them. And and now you can get like multiple, or they weren't single use, which is the big thing. And
But
so
you are allowed to use them.
you are allowed to
Yes.
use them. There's nothing saying you can't. God, would this suck if you couldn't use them?
That'd be horrible. I don't know if you could. I mean, I guess you could. People have spent, enough hours doing anything, but it would
Yeah.
be brutal.
There are certain like moves that only can come from TMs and HMs that are like necessary for some type matchups. Like the one I usually use is Earthquake because just it's really good.
Mhm.
You never get that like aside from like Doug Trio, I think gets it naturally, but most of the time you're not going to get that by leveling up. And so if you didn't use TMs and HMs, God help you.
Yeah, the other like Toxic is super powerful
Yep.
in Nuzlocke because you can just stall people out. But the
Mhm.
other thing too, Gino, I should have mentioned this when you were talking about sort of general advice, is the importance of setup moves.
Mhm.
So like moves like Swords Dance or Iron Defense, like things that boost your stats can be super important in Nuzlocke. Like you could just play through a regular Pokemon playthrough and never click these once. I mean, I
Mhm.
definitely have.
Yeah.
But like in Nuzlocke, if you find a good matchup and you can spam 3 Swords Dances, you can just sweep your opponent's entire team and you don't have to worry about what comes next.
Yep. These are
There's
the
no exposing the rest of your team to danger.
exactly. These are the moves that when you're 12 years old or whatever, you're like, that doesn't do any damage. I'm not
Yep.
going to use that ever. But it's actually like, this is why I think we should play Pokemon Showdown, which is like basically just Pokemon battles on a PC client.
Mhm.
because like you'll have whole teams that are set around like doing I think it's banned actually now that I
Baton
think of it.
pass, yeah.
Baton pass, yeah. You would swords dance, baton pass, and then pass to something that already has a really high attack. Yeah, and then you would just sweep, and that's why it's
The other-
banned because it sucks.
The other thing that's super important on Showdown are hazards, like Stealth Rock and Spikes that hurt you every time you switch Pokemon.
Exactly.
Those are basically useless in a Nuzlocke because the AI never switches.
Yep.
Because the AI is dumb.
I've only seen the AI do it like twice in.
Yeah, the only time I see it is when I throw a Perish Song.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow, it's smart enough to do that.
It is. That's the only time it'll switch.
That's
Haha, I
crazy.
put the Paris song on just so that you would jump into my stealth rock, you idiot. You absolute moron.
Take that chip damage.
I wonder if the mods make it so they switch Pokemon more often. I don't know.
I don't know.
I would have to play more of them to find out.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So it's fair to say you've done Nuzlocke, you've done some competitive play, then both of you as well?
Yeah.
Competitive battling.
Mm-hmm.
What is your advice for someone who wants to get into either of these ways of playing a game that maybe they've felt like they've left behind or they haven't had a chance to revisit? Like, what would you say to someone who wants to get into the serious side of Pokemon?
We got to learn that math. Me and Em just sort of tore through pretty quick. It's
Yeah.
basically a math problem at one point.
Yep.
There's also a cool website. Oh gosh, I just type it in and it comes up. Pokemon Showdown has a damage calculator too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just calc.pokemonshowdown.com where you can punch in like any combination of stats, Pokemon attacks, anything, and it'll tell you how much damage it does. Super useful, both for Nuzlocke and competitive.
Yeah. It'll tell you like likelihood of one hit killing something based on like what the type matchup is and perfect IVs and all the things that you would check if you were in a showdown match. So it's useful. It's really hard to wrap your head around if you're just like, I've played a regular Pokemon. I'm going to now do this.
It's
a
completely different.
completely different environment. But there are ways to get used to it.
The other thing I would say is pick a generation.
Mm-hmm.
So like enough changes between gens that like a Pokemon that was good. Like Politoed is a really good example. Or Turkle. Like for a long time Torkoal was terrible. But then in I think Ultra Sun, that's 7. In Gen 7 they gave it a really good ability, Drought, which summons Sun. So like now all of a sudden Torkoal's really good. So you need to know that changed between Gen 6 and Gen 7 and adjust accordingly. So pick a generation, get good at that before you start trying to like do them all.
Yeah. Pick the most recent one and work backwards from there. See if you like it. If you get as far back as like, gold and silver,
You're a degenerate.
good for you, honestly.
Just Nuzlocke Red, let's do this.
Hell yeah.
Live that life.
I would be so frightened.
I have Red. I could do that. Teach me. This is the one I've got. It's good, right?
It's certainly a Pokemon game.
It is. The one good thing about it is you get infinite rare candies.
That's true.
So you don't have to level grind.
That's true. Yeah, so I think that covers a lot of the questions I had on competitive Pokemon play and Nuzlocks. Are there any other challenge runs that you've done beyond just Nuzlocks and trying to be the very best you can possibly be? Have you done randomizers? Have either of you messed around with Nuzlocke randomizers?
Yes.
No, those are super popular too, though.
They are.
Yep.
I thought that Nuzlocke implied randomizer.
No, people do it, like I said,
Sometimes.
yeah, because it's super repetitive to just like do the same run over and over again. But the problem with the randomizer is like if you catch or like let's say you even start with like a Mewtwo.
Yep.
Like you're just gonna tear through everybody.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, until you hit the Dark Ray in the wild. And then...
Here's the thing with a randomizer. This is like the meme that you see around if you do these things. It's like someone starts up a randomizer and they're like, "Oh hell yeah, a Reggie Steele," and then they pick that, and then they go into the first battle, and it is only able to use explosion, which kills you instantly. So a lot of the randomizer runs end in the professor's office, basically. You really gotta put a lot more work into it if you're doing a randomizer, especially if it's like randomizing types and all that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a version of Pokemon Crystal that I played, which is basically entirely randomized. That then like they made sprites for all the different variants of the Pokemon. So like the one that I remember because one of my friends hates it is they made Snorlax into a fighting type, and so they made like skinny Snorlax. And
He's doing that Tybo.
exactly. I'll get the name of this because I tried to play it. I tried to do a Nuzlocke of it, and then I was like, this is too hard. I can't wrap my head around it well enough. And then I was doing just a regular run of it. I was like, this is still pretty hard, but I'm glad I'm not Nuzlocking it. This is called Fool's Gold. Because that's
a good name.
Yeah. If you...
The other...
Yes?
The other super popular sort of Nuzlocke variation, YouTubers love it because they can combine both of their audiences, is a Soul Link Nuzlocke.
Ooh, yeah.
So basically the way this one works is, Gino, let's say me and you were playing a Nuzlocke together.
Yes.
We'd go to Route 3 and we'd both catch a Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
So like, let's say you have a Mankey, I have a Pidgey, right? If your Mankey dies, my Pidgey also dies.
Oh God.
Yeah. So it's basically combining Pokemon, like they're soul linked.
That's
the
a
other
trust
variation,
fall, but a video
like,
game.
Yep.
Yeah. The other rule they do for soul links is like, if I want to use my Pidgey, you have to use your Mankey.
Oh.
So like our parties have to line up.
See, this is the like friendships end way of playing. If you want your friend to like hate your guts, try this one out.
That's one where you're like, yeah, we're married.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're down for this.
Yeah.
This is one where like, if you want to be those two kids who are hanging out in the waiting to mess up your run, Em, like those two kids.
Yes.
We're like, yeah, we've trained our Pokemon in perfect synchronous.
Yes.
We are a duo to be feared. That's how you do it. You and this other person soul linking your Pokemon together. This Mankey and this Spearow have been together since birth.
Yep. It's a nightmare. Some of the variations that you can do of this very simple rule set. I like to have a happy end to my runs. A lot of people don't do this, but I'm like sentimental. If I beat the Elite Four and the champion and all that, I say that all of the Pokemon that died come back to life for end game stuff.
Oh,
yeah,
That's a nice touch.
Yeah.
The only concession I give myself is that I don't count death that happen while level grinding.
Mm.
oh,
You just sort of like have to grind. Like if I'm grinding wild Pokemon, like I could very easily switch one of my Mons out to like save a death. And if I had a million rare candies, I wouldn't have to grind.
Mm-hmm.
So like technically that's cheating, but you know, I also
Who's gonna
want to
stop
enjoy.
you?
Yeah,
Where's
I want
the
to
Poke
enjoy the
Cop?
game I'm playing.
Yep.
So
That's a
I
lot
only
of
count trainer deaths or like set battle deaths.
Yeah, this is like a testament of your discipline. Also, doing a Nuzlocke,
Mhm.
I have very low discipline, so sometimes I will get to like the third gym and I lose something very important. I'm like, maybe this wasn't a Nuzlocke after all.
Two, I should ask you this. I should have asked at the beginning because this is a real test of your
Yes.
Pokemon cred.
Yeah.
Do you play your Nuzlocks on set mode or switch mode?
Oh, I do I do Switch. Which
You clown.
I know.
What does that mean?
So
You bear your shame to Gino.
so basically, in Pokemon, at the end of one Pokemon faints, and then you get the option when a trainer is switching in another Pokemon to switch your Pokemon immediately or leave that Pokemon in and just continue on. So you have some forewarning of what's coming. If you choose to switch, that is like every time it's going to ask you like, do you want to switch your Pokemon? And this is the clown way to do it, and it's the way that I do it. And then if you have this set to off, it will not ask you. It'll just switch in the Pokemon, and then you have to deal with it from there. It's
So
harder.
you are keeping maximum flexibility, but at the cost of a tiny bit of sanity every time a Pokemon dies.
Yeah, pretty much. Like the way to do it is to just like not have any forewarning. The way I do it is I get a little bit of time to like switch into something more advantageous. It's the clown way to do it. I understand. I accept it. It's also what it's set to by default, and I usually
It's
just
true.
don't mess with it. But
I also don't play blind though.
Okay.
So like if I'm going into a route, let's say I'm like, oh, I'm headed into Route 19, I look up what the trainers on that route have.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be battling this person. They have these Pokemon. I probably know what's coming. So I do have forewarning in that sense. Once the battle starts, then I'm set.
See, I don't get that granular view of it. Using the website that I use gives you like important battles, and also it shows you what Pokemon are on the route. So you can like plan, like if you want a certain Pokemon on that route, you can sort of adjust accordingly if you're using the dupes clause or whatever. So that's the way that I get some forewarning, and also like gym battles, it'll show their team, and that's so you can like if you're using you have to be under their level rule that Pete uses, you can account for that. But I don't do that. I over leveled a fuck. I was 10 levels higher than the Elite Four when I won my last run. Don't tell anybody.
I won't.
Okay.
And I guess final question: what do you think makes Nuzlocke so compelling? Why do you do it? It's self-discipline, like you said. No one's checking your homework. There's no, most Nuzlocke runs are not going up onto a leaderboard or something. But you're obviously doing it a lot. So what is the thing for you? What is it? Just ingenuity? Is it gumption, grit? Cute little Pokemon? Seeing them all die?
If it was about the cute Pokemon, you wouldn't want them to die.
I just love math problems. I want to turn my video games into just simple arithmetic. No, I do it because if you played enough like Pokemon games, you know that it gets pretty easy.
Yeah.
If you're just like, I'll just play this and just sort of tear through it. It's like Nuzlocks are a way to basically put in the hard mode in Pokemon that for whatever reason Nintendo has always refused to give us.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates tension, right? Like in a regular Pokemon run, there's no real tension if you know you can try over and over again.
Yep.
In this, you get one shot, and that's just more exciting to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I was gonna say, I do it because I can't play Pokemon normally anymore.
My brain is broken.
Yeah, like I don't know, just I've tried to play like straight through and not have a challenge mode, a mindset to it, and I'm just like, well, I could just do this, I could do this but harder. It's a compulsion at this point, which is why I don't really play that many Pokemon games unless I'm doing a Nuzlocke, because I'm gonna like have the brainworms of like, oh, but if I if I play this a little bit differently, I'll, I can't catch every Pokemon on a route anymore. Like, I don't know. It feels wrong. It feels like I'm cheating now.
That's basically my thing with Final Fantasy V at this point. I've played it in 4-job Fiesta format so many times that the concept of having access to all of the jobs feels like cheating.
Yep.
I was like, but I could beat the game with only 4 of them. Why would I use all of them?
You get it, man.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Very cool. So thank you both for expounding on this very cool little niche of video gaming and Pokemon fandom. If you had to recommend one game for someone new to this to Nuzlocke, which one would you recommend?
I'd start with X and Y.
Yeah.
It's probably the easiest one. Ultra Sun's cool because there are a lot of like big, heavy battles you have to deal with. So if like you want a challenge, that's one of the harder ones. If you want a good starter one, that would be X or Y.
Yep. X or Y is generally accepted as the easiest one to do. I say go right to like gold. Do gold and silver. See what happens.
Original gold and silver?
Yeah. No. Let's see. I think black and white was actually one of the better ones for starting. But it also is like it can be difficult if you are fresh into it. Try it out. Don't start it the first gen. Start with the recent gens. Work your way backwards, as I said before.
I don't know. I've got red.
All right.
It's right here looking at me.
Throw that in the trash.
Report back to us how it goes.
The issue with later gens too, the most recent ones like Sword and Shield, and I want to say Scarlet and Violet, is they just like have Pokemon popping up in the overworld.
Yeah.
So you can just look over and be like, oh, there's a Diglett. Do I want Diglett?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to come up with like weird workarounds, like closing your eyes or like using a random number generator to pick your Pokemon for you.
Yeah, it's a little bit harder in like Legends Arceus. I know people were trying to do it when that was out. I haven't touched Scarlet and Violet yet, so I don't even know what the situation is there. It's weird because it's one giant open world with like I think there's like 3 or 4 areas to it, so you can't do like by route. You got to get weird with it.
If you're not walking around, if you're not playing Pokemon Scarlet in a sensory deprivation tank so that you don't know what Pokemon you're going to get, you're not playing it right.
Correct.
You're blowing it.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, folks, if you want to hear more episodes like this, more fun little one-offs, let us know. Send us an email. You can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections and DeepListensPodcast at gmail.com. You can support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah. I was happy to talk about, one of my gaming niches.
Thank you, Em.
Yep. Thank you. Very impressed with your knowledge, Pete.
A lot of YouTube.
Yeah.
And thank you, listeners. Till next time. Peace.